My name is Elaine Monroe. I'm 56 years old. And as I sat across from my son in that dimly lit diner on 47th Street in Chicago, I realized that nothing in my life was what it seemed. Not my family, not my marriage, and certainly not my own son. "Mom," Jason whispered, leaning forward, his emerald eyes locked onto mine. "You're safe now. I've handled everything." Safe. That one word sliced through me like a rusted blade. Because safety in my family has always come at a price. And Jason, my sweet boy, was smiling the same way his grandfather once did, right before ruining lives. I gripped my coffee cup tighter, my knuckles pale and trembling. The rain outside bled against the window like tears trying to escape a secret. Secrets. Always secrets. Handled what exactly? My voice cracked under the weight of a truth I wasn't sure I was ready to hear. Jason's smile widened. The inheritance. The trust. The house. Everything grandfather tried to steal from you, from us. I inhaled sharply, feeling the oxygen abandon my lungs. Because my father, Judge Harold Monroe, was long dead. Or so I thought. For decades, our family had lived beneath the pristine mask of perfection. A respected legal dynasty. The Monroes. Admired, feared, envied. But beneath our mansion's marble floors lay rot, generational sins wrapped in wealth and blood. Jason's voice softened, but every word felt like a blade. He thought he could control us from the grave, Mom. But I found the letters. I found her. Her. The forbidden ghost that haunted my mother's sleepless nights. The other woman. The half-sister I was forbidden to know existed. My stomach churned. Jason, what have you done? His eyes darkened, like his father's once did when he delivered unspoken threats behind warm smiles. Because Jason was not just my son. He was his father's son too. And his father, David Monroe, had mastered manipulation long before Jason was born. I did what none of you had the courage to do. His voice was chilling. Calm. Calculated. Deadly. You mean blackmail? I whispered. Jason leaned back, his fingers tapping the mahogany table rhythmically, like a countdown. I mean justice. The word twisted in my ears. My father had disinherited me after Mother's mysterious overdose, claiming I was unstable, unfit. He painted me as the broken daughter, the fragile Monroe. But what they never revealed was why my mother spiraled into pills and silence. Because my mother had discovered Harold's decades-long affair with a woman who was once my nanny. A woman who bore him an illegitimate daughter, Sabrina. A sister I never knew I had. For years, they buried her existence beneath legal threats and hush money. My mother drowned herself in denial. And I was forced into silence, carrying the shame of sins I never committed. Until tonight. Jason reached into his coat pocket and slid a thin envelope across the table. The seal was broken. The contents burned my eyes before I even touched it. DNA test results. Jason, no. I whispered. Yes, Mother, he said coldly. Sabrina's alive. And she's suing the Monroe estate. For everything. But don't worry, I've neutralized the situation. Neutralized. That word didn't belong to my child. It belonged to men like my father. Men who crush souls behind closed doors while hosting charity galas. I stared at the test results. The black and white proof of a sibling I was denied. Of a bloodline my father fought to keep in the shadows. But how? My voice trembled. How did you find her? Jason's lips curled. She found me. She wanted to expose everything. She wanted to burn the Monroe name to ash. He paused, letting the silence thicken like fog. But I offered her a deal instead. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. Every breath I took felt like inhaling broken glass. Because whatever deal Jason made, it was born from darkness. I gave her full rights to my shares. To your inheritance. The house. The stocks. Everything she wanted. In exchange, she disappears. No press. No lawsuits. No police digging into what really happened to Grandma. The words hit like gunshots. Everything she wanted? My inheritance? Our home? Jason smiled wider, seeing my horror. Don't worry, Mom. You're safe. We'll start fresh somewhere else. Somewhere else. As if we were fugitives. As if he hadn't just dismantled my entire life in exchange for silence. Tears welled in my eyes. You gave her everything? Jason's voice dropped to a whisper. Mom. Sabrina wasn't going to stop. She was ready to expose what happened to Grandma. About the overdose. About the real reason you were disinherited. About Grandpa's private fund for discretions. He leaned forward. I did this for you. For us. But I could barely hear him. My mother's face flashed in my mind, pale, cold, lifeless on that marble bathroom floor. They called it accidental overdose. But the secret whispered in my nightmares was far darker. My mother found out my father was going to leave everything to Sabrina. She threatened to expose him. And days later, she was dead. I had always suspected. But Jason had confirmed it. And now he had made a deal with the daughter of my mother's murderer. My voice shattered. You sold our souls for silence. Jason's face hardened, the warmth draining like color from a dying flower. I secured our survival. That's what Monroe men do. Men. Yes. Because Jason was no longer my little boy. He had become them. And in that moment, the final thread between us snapped. You think you've protected me, I whispered, but you've finished what they started. You've buried me alive. Jason's face remained unreadable. Outside, the rain roared louder, as if the heavens themselves wept for what my family had become. Broken, twisted, and utterly damned. I stood up, my legs weak beneath me. Where are you going? Jason asked. I looked into my son's eyes one last time, the same eyes that once radiated innocence, now polluted with inherited poison. Home, I whispered. But we both knew. I no longer had one. I drove through the rain, the wipers slashing across the windshield like desperate hands trying to erase the night. But nothing could erase the truth now. I was homeless. Not because of poverty. Not because of bad luck. But because of my own son. The child I raised to be better than the men who destroyed my mother's life. And yet, here we were. As the towering gates of the Monroe estate came into view, my stomach clenched. The house looked different now, colder, unfamiliar. A fortress built on generations of betrayal. The security guard at the gate stepped forward, his face pale under the floodlights. Mrs. Monroe, I'm afraid. I know. I interrupted, my voice dead. My name's no longer on the deed. He swallowed hard. I'm sorry. I wasn't. Not anymore. I simply turned the wheel and drove past, heading toward the only place I knew could shelter me tonight, Aunt Lillian's. But as I drove, my mind kept returning to Jason's face at that diner. His calm. His pride. He thought he'd saved me. But all he had done was complete a cycle of generational sin. Because the Monroes didn't survive by being honorable. They survived by being merciless. I remember the first time I truly saw it. I was 12. Standing outside my father's study, listening to him whisper to a man in a dark suit with hollow eyes. Make sure she understands. If she talks, she disappears. At the time, I thought he was speaking about some criminal he was prosecuting. Only years later did I learn he was speaking about my mother's sister, my aunt, who had threatened to reveal his affair with the nanny. She vanished 3 weeks later. No police investigation. No questions. Just silence. The Monroe way. I reached Aunt Lillian's house after midnight. The porch light was on. When she opened the door, she didn't speak. She simply pulled me into her frail arms. You finally see it, don't you? She whispered. I nodded, unable to hold back the tears. I failed you, Elaine, she said softly, guiding me inside. I should have told you everything years ago. But your father, he made us all terrified. We sat in the quiet living room, lit only by the dim glow of the fireplace. You always hinted at secrets, I whispered. But you never told me why she really? She didn't overdose. Lillian cut me off, her voice cracking. She was silenced. The words hung between us like a phantom. Your father found out she was preparing to file for divorce. She was going to expose his second family. Sabrina, the secret daughter. His entire legacy was at risk. I closed my eyes. The puzzle pieces fit too perfectly now. The overdose. The suicide note my mother never wrote. The sudden change in the will. He paid off the coroner, Lillian continued. And after your mother's death, he disinherited you, made it look like you were mentally unstable. Easier to discredit you, should you ever ask questions. My breath caught in my throat. I never stood a chance, did I? You were a child trapped in a game far older than you, Lillian whispered. It's always been like this in our family. I stared into the fire. And Jason? My voice trembled. Lillian's lips tightened. He's learned the Monroe ways too well. The next morning, I woke to dozens of missed calls. Jason. David. Lawyers. Then one name made my blood run cold. Sabrina Caldwell. She'd texted me directly. We need to meet. Alone. No lawyers. No Jason. I agreed. Because whatever deal Jason made with her, it wasn't over. Not really. Not yet. We met at an old cafe downtown. She was younger than me, early 40s, but there was something hauntingly familiar in her features. The Monroe eyes. The Monroe jawline. My father's DNA staring back at me. She didn't waste time. Your son is clever, Sabrina said softly, stirring her tea. But foolish. He thinks giving me his inheritance will make me disappear. I remained silent, studying her. You and I, she continued, were the real casualties. The women. Her voice cracked slightly on that word. Women. As if all the unshed grief of generations trembled beneath it. You think I wanted money? Sabrina whispered. I wanted truth. I wanted our story to finally see daylight. My throat burned. Then why take the deal? She smiled sadly. Because your son gave me something your father never could. Leverage. Control. Her eyes locked with mine. I own Monroe Industries now. Every company. Every asset. Every dirty ledger your father kept hidden. I froze. The private fund. The offshore accounts he used to silence people. To fund bribes. To cover the deaths. Sabrina leaned in. I have the documents. The confessions. Even the files on what really happened to Aunt Beatrice, your mother's sister. My heart stopped. She's dead. No, Sabrina whispered. She's alive. Hidden. Institutionalized under a fake name for 30 years. Your father paid doctors to keep her silent. Tears stung my eyes. This wasn't just betrayal. This was systematic annihilation of anyone who threatened him. My voice was barely a whisper. Why are you telling me this? Sabrina's smile twisted. Because I don't want Jason to continue this sickness. And because you're my sister. The word hung in the air like a fragile balloon. Sister. I had hated the idea of her existence my entire life. But now, looking at her, at the pain in her eyes, I saw myself. Both of us were raised as pawns in a sick game orchestrated by a man who never loved anyone but power. Sabrina reached into her purse and slid a flash drive across the table. This is everything. Every file, every secret. You have a choice, Elaine. What choice? I whispered, my hand trembling as I touched the drive. You can burn it. Pretend none of this ever happened. Let Jason continue his version of the Monroe dynasty. She paused. Or you can release it. Destroy the Monroe name forever. Expose the murders. The blackmail. The institutionalizations. But if you do, Jason goes down too. My breath caught. What do you mean? She stared into my soul. Your son didn't just offer me his shares. He offered something else. What? The recording. Sabrina's voice cracked now. The recording of your father's confession. How he arranged your mother's death. And how Jason found it, but chose to use it as leverage rather than bring him to justice. I felt like vomiting. Jason had the smoking gun, all along. And instead of freeing our family, he used it to negotiate power. Just like his grandfather would have. I stood up suddenly, the chair scraping sharply against the floor. My legs shook. Sabrina's voice followed me as I stumbled toward the door. We're both victims, Elaine. But only one of us can end this cycle. I stepped into the cold wind outside, my mind spinning. That night, back at Aunt Lillian's, I stared at the flash drive for hours. The weight of generations sat in my palm. Expose it, and I destroy Jason's future. Bury it, and I continue the legacy of silence. Lillian sat beside me quietly, her old, wrinkled hands covering mine. I can't save him if I destroy him, I whispered. Lillian's voice was brittle, yet fierce. Or you can save him by breaking him. The Monroe men never learn by mercy. They only learn when their empire burns. A tear slipped down my cheek. He's my son. Lillian squeezed my hand harder. And he's becoming his grandfather. The room was silent except for the old clock ticking, each second a cruel reminder that time was running out. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. A new message. From Jason. You met with her. I know. You won't destroy me, Mom. You love me too much. His arrogance sliced through my heart. That's when I realized. Jason didn't believe I had the strength to end him. And that was exactly why I had to. For my mother. For Aunt Beatrice. For every woman silenced by the Monroe name. And yes, for Jason too, because sometimes love means breaking what's corrupted before it consumes everything. I picked up the flash drive. Tomorrow, the world would learn the truth. The morning sun rose like a silent witness. The Monroe legacy was about to bleed into public view, and there was no turning back. I sat at the lawyer's office downtown. The air inside was sterile, but my heart was anything but calm. The weight of the flash drive in my purse felt heavier than my entire body. Across from me sat Gretchen Wallace, one of the few attorneys fearless enough to take on this war. Once this goes public, there's no way to stop it, she warned, her tone sharp. You understand that, right, Elaine? I understand, I whispered. Gretchen exhaled and slid a release document across the table. The files will be leaked to every major outlet. Financial crimes, blackmail, cover-ups, unlawful institutionalization, murder. She locked eyes with me. And your son will be charged with obstruction, conspiracy, and blackmail. Once the prosecutors see the recording, they'll have no choice. I flinched. The thought of Jason in handcuffs felt like a spear through my chest. He was my son. But the Monroe disease had devoured him. Gretchen's voice softened. You're not destroying your son, Elaine. Your father already did that. Tears welled up, but I forced a breath. Let it begin. She nodded and pressed the button. The first wave of files uploaded. Emails, signed confessions, bank records, audio tapes. The family rot was no longer hidden. I stared at the screen as my entire life unraveled in digital form. By midday, headlines were erupting across every news channel. Monroe family empire built on murder, blackmail, and fraud. Secret daughter exposes decades of crimes. Multi-billion-dollar Monroe Industries collapses in scandal. Unreleased recording reveals Monroe patriarch confessing to wife's death. My phone buzzed nonstop. Friends, reporters, strangers. But there was only one call that mattered. Jason. His voice was venomous, yet trembling. How could you do this? Because I still love you, Jason, I said softly. And I couldn't let you become him. You've destroyed everything. No, Jason. I've freed us. My voice cracked but held steady. Your grandfather ruled by secrets. You tried to do the same, but this cycle ends with me. There was a long pause, and then his voice shifted, like a wounded child. But now I have nothing. My heart shattered. You still have me. You always will. But you have to face what you've done. Jason let out a bitter laugh that quickly dissolved into silence. I thought I was protecting us, Mom. No, I whispered. You were protecting power. The line went dead. The storm was only beginning. Within hours, federal agents raided Monroe Industries. Helicopters swirled over our former mansion. Investigations exploded like wildfire. But the one call I wasn't prepared for came later that night. It was Sabrina. You did it, she whispered. Yes, I replied, my voice hollow. We did. There was a pause. I have something to show you, Elaine. You deserve to see everything. We met at an old abandoned psychiatric hospital on the city's outskirts, the place where my mother's sister, Aunt Beatrice, had been hidden for 30 years under a false identity. The building reeked of mildew and dust, as though it, too, carried the weight of unspeakable secrets. In a small room with faded green walls, an elderly woman sat in a wheelchair. Her eyes lifted as I entered. She was thinner, frail, but I recognized her instantly. Aunt Beatrice? My voice trembled. Her lips quivered, as if speaking was a foreign muscle. Elaine, she rasped. Tears poured from my eyes. Yes, it's me. Beatrice wept silently, her thin hand reaching for mine. They said you were dead, I whispered. They wanted me dead, she said softly. But Harold thought locking me away would be cleaner. Less questions. Her eyes, though worn, still held fire. They made your mother choose silence, Elaine. She tried to protect you. I sobbed as Beatrice held my hand tightly, as if anchoring herself to what little family she had left. My mother never gave up on me, I choked. No, Beatrice whispered. She died trying to free me. And in that moment, everything inside me broke into pieces. The generations of women whose lives were stolen. Their silence. Their pain. Their resistance. But now, their truth was free. The following days were a whirlwind. Beatrice was transferred to a private facility. The courts opened a federal case against Monroe Industries. Multiple arrests followed, including Jason. Seeing him led away in handcuffs on live television felt like a funeral for my heart. But part of me knew it was necessary. He needed to face his choices. The Monroe curse could only end through reckoning. I visited him in holding 2 days later. Jason sat behind the glass, his face pale, his once proud eyes hollowed out. Why are you here? He whispered. Because you're my son. He laughed bitterly. You put me here. I saved you, Jason, I whispered. The man you were becoming, he wasn't you. His voice broke. I thought I could fix everything. I thought controlling the truth was safer than exposing it. I leaned forward, tears burning my eyes. Controlling truth is how your grandfather murdered your grandmother. It's how he buried Aunt Beatrice. It's how he corrupted everything. You weren't saving me. You were repeating him. He looked down, tears rolling down his cheeks. I'm so sorry, Mom. I placed my hand on the glass, wishing I could hold him. You'll have time to make it right. His lip trembled. How? By facing what you did, I whispered. By surviving what they tried to hide. By learning how to live without power. As I left the detention center that night, a strange peace settled inside me. For the first time in my life, the Monroe name was stripped of its polished lies. And I was free. No longer Elaine Monroe, daughter of a tyrant. But Elaine, survivor of a blood-soaked empire. The world now knew the truth. And my son, perhaps one day, would finally be free of its chains. The courtroom was packed. The Monroe trial, they called it. America's most scandalous dynasty crumbling in full public view. But beneath the flashing cameras, the angry voices, and the reporters hunting for their next headline, this was still my family. Jason sat at the defense table, wearing a navy suit too big for his thinner frame. His hands were cuffed. His eyes, once proud and defiant, now drifted nervously as the court came to order. I sat behind him, clutching the silver cross my mother gave me on my 12th birthday. The last gift before her death was orchestrated. A symbol of hope that had lost its meaning for years. But now, perhaps, hope was returning. The prosecution called their first witness, Sabrina Caldwell. She entered the courtroom with controlled confidence, her heels tapping sharply against the cold marble floor. My half-sister, the daughter my father kept hidden like a dark shadow. She sat, lifted her chin, and locked eyes with Jason. The prosecutor wasted no time. Miss Caldwell, can you confirm that you were offered financial compensation to remain silent about your existence and your father's crimes? Yes, Sabrina answered. Jason Monroe offered me full ownership of Monroe Industries and access to the family's private offshore accounts in exchange for my silence. The courtroom murmured. Jason lowered his head. But you declined the original arrangement, correct? I accepted temporarily, Sabrina said, voice calm. But I knew silence would only continue the family's toxic legacy. I wanted the truth exposed. Her voice trembled slightly. I could see the war inside her, between justice and revenge. And did Jason Monroe provide you with the evidence implicating his grandfather in multiple crimes, including murder? Yes. And you used that evidence to negotiate with him? Yes. The prosecutor circled back. Why did you change your mind and release the evidence publicly? Sabrina paused. Her voice softened. Because Elaine gave me courage. My sister had already lost so much. I refused to become another pawn like our mother and grandmother. The jury listened, captivated. The room shifted as generations of hidden crimes finally saw the light. The prosecutor stepped closer. One final question. Were you aware that Jason Monroe withheld his grandfather's confession for months before attempting to leverage it? Sabrina's throat tightened. Yes. He found the recording almost a year ago. The courtroom gasped. I shut my eyes, pain slicing through my heart again. My son had been sitting on the truth. He could have freed us a year ago, but he waited. For leverage. For power. The defense rose. Jason's attorney, sharp and cold, approached Sabrina. Ms. Caldwell, you've benefited tremendously since this scandal broke, have you not? Sabrina frowned. I've gained nothing except the truth. Come now, the lawyer pressed. You control Monroe Industries now. $1 billion empire. You're hardly a victim. Sabrina's voice cut like steel. I am a victim. Of my father's lies. Of being erased from existence. Of watching my mother die in poverty, while Harold Monroe paraded as a respectable judge. The lawyer smirked. And yet, you negotiated with Jason Monroe before releasing any evidence. That suggests you were willing to sell your silence for the right price. I was scared, Sabrina admitted. I didn't trust anyone. But Elaine changed that. The defense lawyer smiled. Ah, yes, Elaine. The woman who conveniently waited decades to expose the truth. The woman who, according to sealed medical records, was once committed to psychiatric observation. The words were daggers. The courtroom twisted. Whispers erupted. Eyes turned toward me. My darkest secret, used now as ammunition. I clenched my fists. Yes. I had been committed briefly after my mother's death. Not because I was unstable, but because my father needed me silenced too. A 15-year-old girl mourning her mother's suicide had become his next obstacle. My medical file had always been a weapon. The defense continued. Isn't it true, Miss Caldwell, that Elaine Monroe may have influenced your decision by feeding you biased information rooted in her own delusions about this family? Sabrina's jaw tightened. No, she snapped. Elaine showed me the evidence. The same evidence your client tried to bury. The courtroom quieted again. The weight shifted back toward the truth. The judge banged his gavel, silencing the chaos. During recess, Jason requested to see me. I hesitated, but I went. We sat in a small side room, 2 feet apart, with a glass wall between us. His face was pale, exhausted, but his eyes, for the first time in months, held something new. Fear. Mom, he whispered, they're going to destroy me. You destroyed yourself, Jason, I said softly. But you still have a choice. He shook his head. I thought I was doing what Grandpa would have wanted, protecting the family. And you became him, I whispered. But this can end with you. Tears welled in his eyes. I'm scared. I leaned closer. Jason, your grandfather built this family on lies. You inherited his empire of silence. But you don't have to inherit his soul. He sobbed. What do I do? Tell the truth. All of it. On the stand. Without your lawyers. Without deals. His shoulders shook. They'll destroy me. No, I said firmly. They'll finally free you. The next morning, everything shifted. Jason stood. The courtroom sat in stunned silence as he requested to testify against the advice of his own defense team. He took the oath, voice trembling. My name is Jason Monroe, and everything you've heard is true. Gasps erupted. He continued, eyes glassy. My grandfather murdered my grandmother. He manipulated the courts, paid off doctors, and buried anyone who threatened his power. I found the recording over a year ago. He glanced at me briefly, his voice cracked. And I didn't go to the authorities. I thought I could control it, use it, negotiate. I became the very thing my mother tried to protect me from. He swallowed hard. I am guilty of obstruction, of conspiracy, of betraying my mother, and I accept full responsibility. The courtroom was still. Even Sabrina wiped her eyes. Jason turned toward me fully now, speaking directly from his soul. Mom, I'm sorry. I mouthed the words back. I forgive you. As the judge called for a recess, Sabrina approached me. You saved him, she whispered. No, I whispered. He saved himself. We stood side by side, no longer enemies. 2 women, 2 daughters, who survived the storm. But in my heart, I knew the final reckoning was still coming, because the Monroe legacy may have been exposed. But there was one secret even Sabrina didn't know. One secret buried deeper than all the rest. The storm had finally broken. Jason's confession ignited a national firestorm. Monroe Industries collapsed overnight. Prosecutors moved swiftly. Board members resigned. The family's political allies vanished like cowards escaping a sinking ship. But as the dust settled, there was still one grave left unopened. A secret so deeply buried, even Sabrina didn't know it existed. A secret my mother had tried to take to her grave, and that I had carried like a bleeding wound for over 40 years. It was time. 2 weeks after the trial, I visited the one place I had avoided for decades, my father's private cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains. It sat silent now, untouched since his death. The air smelled of rotting wood and faded perfume, my mother's perfume. Every step inside was like walking through a mausoleum built from my family's sins. Sabrina came with me. She had insisted. I need to know everything, she said quietly. You will, I whispered. We entered his study, the room where he planned every manipulation, every cover-up. The heavy oak desk sat in the center, like a throne of evil. I was 12 when I first saw him bring her here. I said, my voice distant. Your mother. Sabrina froze. They told me she was a housekeeper, a friend of the family. I closed my eyes, but I saw how he touched her, how he whispered to her. Sabrina's face hardened. After Mother found out about the affair, I continued. She threatened to go public. But that wasn't all she discovered. I walked to the bookshelf, running my fingers along the edges until I found it, the hidden latch. The shelf slid open, revealing a small, steel door built into the wall. Behind it, the files, the photographs, the blackmail tapes. But one file sat at the very top, marked only with my name. I pulled it out with trembling hands. Inside was a birth certificate.
Mine.
But not the one I had always known. Sabrina leaned closer. What is it? She whispered. I stared at it, my voice breaking. He wasn't just your father, Sabrina. Her eyes widened. Confusion turned to horror. What are you saying? I handed her the paper. Your mother wasn't just his mistress. I swallowed hard. She was my mother's half-sister. My aunt. Sabrina's breath caught. Her knees buckled. She grabbed the desk for support. We're not half-sisters, I whispered. We're cousins by blood. But legally, I was his daughter. And you were born from the same family line. Her face twisted into something between grief and fury. Dear God, she whispered. He violated both sides of the family. Tears streamed down her cheeks. That's why Mother tried to end it all. I continued. Not just because of the affair, but because she discovered the incest. The sickness. We both stood there, 2 women born from generations of twisted power, staring at the paperwork that confirmed what we had both long suspected. Our entire family tree was poisoned from its roots. Later that night, Sabrina and I sat outside the cabin, silent beneath a sky filled with stars that suddenly felt foreign. Finally, she spoke. Do you hate me? I shook my head instantly.
No.
Her voice cracked. Even after I tried to negotiate my silence? Even after I threatened your son? You are a victim like me, I whispered. We're survivors, Sabrina. And we're free because we refuse to be silent any longer. She sobbed into my arms, releasing years of silent agony neither of us had ever truly shared. The family that tried to erase us had failed, because the daughters survived. In the weeks that followed, Jason received his sentence. The judge acknowledged his full cooperation and public confession. He was given a reduced sentence, 5 years in federal prison with parole options. When I visited him before his transfer, his eyes were clearer than I had seen in years. Do you hate me? He whispered through the glass. No, I said, my voice breaking. I mourn what you could have been, but I will always love you. He wept. Can I ever undo it? I placed my hand on the glass. You can heal, and you will, but you'll have to live every day knowing what this legacy cost us. He nodded, his tears streaming freely. Thank you for saving me, even for myself. Months later, Sabrina and I stood together at a small, private memorial service. But not for our father, for our mothers. We chose to bury them side by side under a beautiful oak tree on neutral ground, away from the Monroe estate, away from the mansion built on their pain. As the last handful of dirt fell upon their joined graves, I whispered, no more secrets. Sabrina placed her arm around my shoulder. We are the end of the Monroe curse, she said softly. No, I corrected, my voice steady now. We are the beginning of something pure. The wind whispered through the trees as if our mothers, at last, could breathe free. Today, I live quietly in a small house by the lake. The cameras have moved on. The headlines have faded. The Monroe name is gone. But Sabrina and I speak every day. We share holidays. We laugh like sisters, real sisters, building a family not from blood, but from choice. Jason writes me letters from prison. He's enrolled in college courses, working toward a degree in counseling, trying, finally, to be something better than his bloodline allowed. The truth nearly destroyed us. But in the ashes, we found something we never thought possible. Freedom. And though I still wake some nights hearing the echoes of my father's voice, I rise with strength knowing that his power died with him. Because we chose to break the chain. Because love, when wielded with courage, is the sharpest weapon against evil. And because sometimes, the only way to save your family is to bury the family that came before.